Are you looking for ways to get more done during your ELA and math block while also having time for some small group instruction? Today I'm going to share different ways I have structured my blocks so that students can get work done independently without me. If you're new here, I'm Rachel Vincent and I love sharing ways to help teachers simplify their classrooms and their teaching. As a teacher, I know it can feel like it is so difficult to find the time to meet the needs of all of our students. Over the years, I have found a few ways that help me balance the whole group small group instructional time. So probably the most common way is sort of a center-based approach where you teach a whole group lesson and then students break off into different centers while you are doing small groups. And then after 20 minutes or so, students rotate to a different center. So that might look like a reading center, a writing center, word work center during your ELA block, or math facts, hands-on games for your math block. That's probably the most common one. There's a lot of reasons teachers love using that. The students can get a variety of tasks done in a short amount of time. To be 100% honest, in fourth grade and in the upper elementary, it's hard to do that. Number one, I do think our classes are smaller than the primary grades. And maybe they're not smaller, but the students definitely are bigger. They take up more space. They have bigger chairs. They have bigger tables or desks. We just take up more space in our classroom, and oftentimes we have larger class sizes. And so rotating around the room can be difficult. And that doesn't even take into account the off-task behaviors and things like that that often happen with a center-based approach. One way I've sort of countered that is to, instead of rotating students, we rotate the activities. So students stay in their seats, but the activity rotates. So for instance, you've taught your whole group lesson, it is time for small group instruction. So one or two groups will be working on independent work that typically comes from like our math curriculum, or maybe it's independent reading. The next group would be working on word work, or if it's math, they're the ones working on our online program, and so on and so forth. So when the time is up, instead of students rotating, they just switch activities. So for instance, the independent group will now work on the online program. The online program is now going to do maybe fact fluency. And so it's really, instead of rotating around the classroom, it's just the students are just rotating what they're doing. So this gives you that same approach where there's a variety of activities that our students are doing. It's just easier to manage in an upper elementary classroom. While I have done that approach, especially in math, and sometimes I still do it occasionally, I have found that it is often not enough time for students to work on independent tasks. It rushes my students who maybe find math challenging, especially in the ELA block. If they take longer to read, then it's time for them to move on and they never go back to that task that they didn't actually finish. I switched to a must-do, may-do structure. It has really helped students be able to move through tasks and independent work at their own pace, so it's not rushing them and allows them to actually get work done. I've used this must-do, may-do in my ELA block for multiple years, and it is the one that I will continue to do for ELA. I just find it works best. With math, I'll be quite honest, it changes sometimes day to day, week to week, sometimes year to year, depending on my group of students or the skills, because math is a little different as far as ability. Some students are really good at one standard, but maybe not so much at the other. So I kind of monitor and adjust that one as the year goes. But I always stick with a must-do, may-do for ELA. Essentially, it just gives the list of things students must do, whether it's independent work, a comprehension sheet, our online programs like iExcel and Amira that I want students to do daily, and gives them a variety of may-do activities that are still literacy based, so that if students are high flyers and move through that must-do list quick, they are reading independently or working on their cursive or book shopping, getting new books from the classroom library, those kinds of things. I have found that it makes things manageable for students. It breaks things into manageable tasks. But I have also found that there are some students who will get stuck in that must-do on one component of it and never continue moving through it. So I've changed it up a little this year. Plus, I wanted to hold a little bit more accountability with my students in especially their online programs. And so I created a must-do, may-do checklist that we move through. So it allows space for students to write the scores that they're making on these online programs, because I've also found that that students will just go through it to say they did it when they didn't actually take their time to do their best. But I've also found other students who would get stuck there. So I used to say for their IXL lesson, whether it was a lesson I assigned them or from their recommendations, they had to get 80 or higher. Most kids can do that, but some of my students who struggled with that would spend 45 minutes on that IXL lesson and never get to any other parts of their must-do list. So I wanted to be able to differentiate for them, but also still hold my other students accountable. And so I have a place now where they can write their score, but it also allows me to write in if a student isn't required to maybe get that 80% because they're just not there yet. Another way that I've taught math, because math is kind of its own beast when it comes to independent work and needing more help sometimes, is I have done sort of a 2 whole group instructional time. Instead of doing a whole group independent pull small group, I have taught my whole group lesson twice and just used different teaching strategies to differentiate. So this system works really well if you have sort of a polar opposite class where you have some high flyers and some strugglers, but you don't have a whole lot of your in the middle kids. So last year I did not do it this way because most of my kids all leaned one way, and so it didn't quite make sense to do it this way. But the year before, I had a very opposite class. So I was able to pull one group and teach them. I typically did my higher level kids because they, when it came to math, only needed a few examples and they got it and they just needed the practice. And so I could teach them in a true mini lesson, 5-10 minutes, whereas my other group needed more guided practice. And so instead of teaching it to everybody and letting those kids not answer any questions because the high flyers got it all, and then pulling them to a small group to teach them, it was kind of like I was doing that just with a larger group. I really like it because, again, it keeps your high kids from answering all the questions. It keeps your lower level kids from sort of slipping under the radar. But I also liked it too because if a student missed a day of instruction, they could come to that second group and get that slower step-by-step guided practice instead of kind of just because they missed that instructional time. I will say the biggest challenge would be you will still have some middle of the road kids. So sometimes figuring out which spot they go in could be a challenge. I had one student that kind of went back and forth depending on the skill. I also told my students, I said, especially in that first group, when I was ready to send them back to their seats to work on independent work before I pulled my second group, I said, if you need more practice, stay for the second group, get that practice, and then you can go. So made it kind of fluid for them to choose how they felt comfortable with. I set it up the same way, whereas my first group was with me, the second group would work on a review task or our online program, which was geared toward their level anyway. And then we'd switch and my second group would work on some independent practice, whereas often I was kind of guiding my students, the second group, through independent practice because that typically would happen anyway with my lower level students. Like I said, a lot of times, especially with math, it changes from year to year depending on the group of students and how I structure my math block. I always do must do, may do with ELA, and then oftentimes I will start with a must do, may do for math and then kind of adjust it depending on my students' needs. So I hope these strategies help you find a way to balance teaching whole group and small group with your class. If you would like some more information on how to sort of begin this sort of structure of you teaching, students working, check out the video that's on your screen now.